The email came at 2:17 a.m. The subject line was only 3 words long. Urgent fraud alert. By the time the sun rose, my entire career was gone. That was the morning I learned my only son had used my name, my license, to steal from my clients. And as I stood in my kitchen, barefoot, holding the phone that wouldn't stop ringing, I realized something. The world doesn't crumble with noise. It crumbles in silence. That betrayal lit a fire in me I never thought I had. My name is Susan Hayes. I used to manage millions. Now, I serve coffee. But before I tell you how I went from boardrooms to aprons, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? I want to know how far stories like mine travel, how many of us have been broken by our own blood and still stood back up. I was 58 when everything fell apart. For 33 years, I worked as a certified financial planner. My clients trusted me with their futures, college funds, retirement plans, family inheritance. I built my reputation one late night, one honest conversation, one careful decision at a time. People used to say, if Susan says it's safe, it's safe. Then my son, Darren, decided that wasn't fast enough. He was 28, bright, handsome, and restless, always chasing something shinier. When he told me he wanted to follow in my footsteps, I thought it was pride. Turns out, it was greed. He forged my signature on a series of investment forms, high-risk, get-rich-quick schemes masked as family-approved opportunities. When the deals collapsed, the clients didn't see his name. They saw mine. By the time the investigators came, Darren had vanished. My office door was sealed. My accounts frozen. Every headline spelled it the same way. Trusted advisor Susan Hayes under investigation. I still remember walking into the firm that morning. The receptionist who'd worked with me for 12 years couldn't even meet my eyes. In the conference room, my boss sat with his hands folded. Susan, we have to let you go. It's policy. I wanted to explain. I wanted to scream. But all I could do was nod. That's the thing about disgrace. It doesn't shout. It whispers in rooms you built. 2 weeks later, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by unopened mail. My phone buzzed with messages from reporters, from friends who didn't know what to say, from clients who wanted refunds. And then a voicemail from Darren. Mom, I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I can fix it. Please don't hate me. His voice cracked at the end, the way it did when he was a child. I deleted it before it finished. That night, I poured myself a glass of cheap wine, the first drink I'd had in years, and stared at my reflection in the window. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. The power suit was gone, the confidence gone. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something else. A quiet defiance. I thought about the people who used to shake my hand and call me ma'am, about the clients who'd cried tears of gratitude when I helped them save their homes, about the years I'd spent earning integrity 1 decimal point at a time. They took my reputation, yes, but not my worth. And I decided, right there in that dimly lit kitchen, that I would survive this. Within a month, I sold my house, packed everything I owned into the trunk of a silver sedan that smelled like old leather and peppermint gum. I left town before dawn, driving east until the city skyline disappeared in the rearview mirror. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed a place where no one knew the name Susan Hayes. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I could rebuild without the weight of every headline pressing against my spine. When I stopped for gas 3 hours later, a billboard caught my eye. Now hiring Maple Diner, all shifts. I laughed out loud. It felt like life was daring me, a woman who once managed portfolios worth millions, to start again at minimum wage. I took the dare. The smell of coffee and frying bacon filled the air as I walked in. The manager, a tired man named Paul, looked me up and down and said, "You ever wait tables before?" I smiled faintly, not officially. He shrugged. "You got 2 hands and patience? That's enough." That's how it began, my second life, wearing an apron instead of a blazer. And though I didn't know it then, the same sharp mind that once built empires would soon save one. The first thing I learned at Maple Diner was that dignity doesn't come with a uniform. The second thing I learned was that coffee burns worse when your pride's already blistered. Hasn't. By the end of my first week, my hands smelled permanently of dish soap and cinnamon syrup. My feet ached in ways my heels never had, and every, "Ma'am, can we get more napkins?" chipped away at the woman I used to be. But I kept smiling, because I needed to remember what honesty felt like again. Paul, the manager, was the kind of man who'd seen too many people come and go to bother with small talk. "You do your job, you keep your tips, and you stay out of drama," he said on my first day. "That's all I ask." "Fair enough," I replied. There was Jenna, too. 23, all freckles and fire, with a laugh that could melt through the 6 a.m. silence. She reminded me of who I used to be before spreadsheets replaced sunlight. "You're too graceful to be new," she said once, balancing a tray of pancakes. I just smiled. Old habits. No one at Maple knew who I was. Not the woman who used to advise CEOs, not the mother whose son's greed had burned her career to ash. Here, I was just Susan, the quiet lady who moved like she'd done this before. It wasn't easy, though. There were nights when the humiliation clung to me like grease. Once, a customer spilled his coffee and barked, "You're lucky you've got a job, lady." And the part of me that once negotiated 6-figure deals wanted to say, "You have no idea who you're talking to." But I didn't. I just wiped the spill, smiled, and said, "Of course, sir." That smile, that silent endurance became my armor. I'd go home after every shift to a small rented apartment above a laundromat. The walls were thin enough to hear the hum of dryers, the laughter of strangers. Some nights, I'd sit by the window, watching people rush home from their jobs, and I'd whisper to myself, "You're still here, Susan. That counts for something." 3 months in, I had the diner's rhythm memorize, the pre-dawn stillness before the breakfast rush, the clatter of silverware, the smell of bacon fat in the air. I found a strange peace in the repetition. Serving food didn't make me small. Dishwashing didn't erase my past. If anything, it stripped away everything false and left only what was real. And slowly the staff began to notice. When the register jammed, I fixed it. When a supplier tried to shortchange Paul, I spotted it in the invoice before he did. One night, when Jenna cried because her paycheck was short, I showed her how to read the breakdown. "Where'd you learn all that?" she asked. "Just experience," I said, and changed the subject. But beneath the calm surface, something still twisted inside me, a restless ache. Every time I passed by a newspaper stand and saw financial headlines, my chest tightened. It wasn't envy. It was grief, the kind that doesn't fade, just quiets down until something reminds it to breathe again. Then one evening, something did. A group of businessmen walked in loud, confident, the kind who think the world tilts to their laughter. They ordered top-shelf whiskey and prime rib like they were signing a declaration of dominance. One of them, tall and silver-haired, spread a stack of papers across the booth. I didn't mean to look, but the charts caught my eye. The numbers were familiar. The mistakes. Obvious. I froze for a moment, tray in hand, watching him scribble notes that screamed disaster to anyone who'd ever managed risk projections. But I reminded myself, you're not that person anymore. You're a waitress. And yet I couldn't look away. He waved his glass at me. "Another round, sweetheart, and hurry it up, will you?" His tone was sharp enough to draw blood. I nodded, hiding the flicker of something old, that quiet, calculating instinct that had built empires once upon a time. Later, when I brought the drinks back, he laughed with his friends about idiot advisors who didn't see the market collapse coming. That's when I said it soft, almost offhand. "Maybe your numbers are wrong." He turned. "Excuse me?" I shrugged. "Just saying, your debt ratio's upside down. You're over-leveraged, probably 6 months from bankruptcy if you don't pivot." The table went silent, then came the laughter. "Financial advice from a waitress," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Sure, why not?" I smiled, poured his drink, and walked away. Behind me, I heard him mutter, "People these days." But there was a tremor in his voice that told me I'd hit something true. That night, as I wiped down the counter, Jenna nudged me. "What was that about?" Nothing, I said. Just a feeling. But when I clocked out and checked the receipt pile, I froze at the name on his card. Gregory Shaw. I knew that name. He wasn't just another arrogant customer. He was the same man who once outbid me for a major client, the one whose anonymous tip years ago helped the investigation that ruined my career. I stood there in the quiet diner, heart pounding beneath my apron, staring at his signature. And for the first time in months, the fire inside me didn't feel like shame. It felt like purpose. The knock came at 6:04 a.m. Sharp, repeated, urgent. At first I thought it was a mistake, maybe the landlord or a delivery gone wrong, but when I looked through the peephole and saw him standing there, expensive coat, tie half undone, eyes wild, I almost laughed. Gregory Shaw. The same man who mocked me 12 hours earlier over whiskey and steak. Now, he looked like he hadn't slept in years. "Miss Keaton," he said the moment I opened the door, voice hoarse. "I need to talk to you." I didn't answer. I just stared. The hallway smelled of detergent and morning dust. Downstairs, someone's radio hummed faintly. "How did you find me?" I asked finally. "Your coworker, Jenna, she said you lived nearby." He hesitated, then added quickly, "I didn't tell her why." Of course he didn't. He ran a trembling hand through his hair. "You were right. About last night, about everything." I leaned against the door frame. "You'll have to be more specific. I say a lot of things." "Don't do that," he snapped. "Don't play games. You told me my company was 6 months from bankruptcy. You were wrong." He swallowed hard. "It's closer to 6 days." He stepped inside before I could stop him, pacing across my tiny apartment like it was a boardroom. "My partner's pulled out. Investors are gone. The bank's calling in loans. His voice cracked. "I don't know how to fix it." I watched him unravel, the same man who once smirked at me over the edge of a crystal glass, now reduced to a panicked shadow of himself. It should have felt satisfying, maybe even righteous. But all I felt was tired. Sit down," I said quietly. He obeyed, collapsing onto the sofa I'd bought secondhand from a college kid. He looked absurdly out of place, $1,000 shoes on a $40 rug. "Why come to me?" I asked. "Because you knew," he said, staring at his hands. "You saw it in 5 seconds what my entire finance team missed in a year. I did some digging last night. You're not some waitress. You're Susan Hayes, the Susan Hayes. You trained half the people I've hired in the last decade." The name hit like a slap. I hadn't heard it spoken aloud in months. And?" I said, forcing calm. "I need you," he admitted. "I'll pay you triple your old salary. Just help me, please." I laughed a dry, bitter sound. "You mocked me in front of your friends. You didn't see a woman, you saw a waitress. Why should I help you?" His jaw tightened. "Because if I go down, hundreds of employees lose their jobs. Families, savings, everything." There it was. The leverage, the plea wrapped in morality. I crossed my arms. "I don't work for men who insult me." He looked up, eyes desperate. "I can fix your record." That made me pause. "What did you say?" "I still have connections at the state board. If you help me stabilize my company, I can talk to them, clear your name. You deserve that much." For a moment the room was silent, except for the faint hum of the fridge. I saw flashes the investigation room, the headlines, the empty office, the humiliation, the way people turned their backs when I walked by. He must have seen something shift in my face because he leaned forward. "Please, Susan. I can't do this without you." I studied him. Once we'd competed for the same high-value clients. He'd won through charm and aggression. I'd relied on trust and precision. I remembered the smug smile he wore at a conference years ago when he told me, "Nice women don't win big." And now here he was, begging on my couch. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was irony. Either way, I wasn't done watching him sweat. "I'll look," I said finally. "That's all, no promises." He exhaled like a drowning man breaking the surface. "Thank you. You won't regret this." I smiled thinly. "We'll see." After he left, I sat in silence. My coffee had gone cold. There was a strange calm in the air, like the stillness before a storm. I wasn't sure if I was stepping into redemption or another disaster. But something deep inside me, that old, dormant part that understood the language of power and numbers, had awakened. And as the morning light crept across my kitchen table, I whispered to myself, "This time I'm not saving a man like him, I'm saving myself." Gregory's office was a monument to arrogance, glass walls, skyline views, and the faint, desperate smell of money trying not to die. Wow. When I walked in the next morning, the staff looked at me the way people look at an unexpected storm, curious, uneasy, a little afraid. I could feel their whispers following me down the corridor. Who is she? Why is she with him? Why is the boss walking 2 steps behind her? He didn't even notice. He was too busy panicking over his balance sheets. "All right," I said, placing my notebook on the table. "Start from the top. Show me everything." Gregory slid a folder toward me. "These are our quarterly numbers. We're bleeding from 3 divisions, and our main partner, Sterling Ventures, pulled out last night." I scanned the papers, eyes tracing the disaster he'd tried to disguise. It didn't take long to see it. The fake growth reports, the hidden losses, the desperate borrowing disguised as strategic reinvestment. "Who approved this?" I asked. He hesitated. "I did." "Of course you did," I murmured. "You built a skyscraper on wet sand." He bristled. "You don't need to insult me, Susan." "I'm not," I said calmly. "I'm describing the landscape. You hired men who only tell you what you want to hear, and now the ground's giving way." He fell silent. "Here's what we're going to do," I continued. "You'll call your legal team, your CFO, and your PR head. Tell them there's a new consultant me and that you'll do exactly what I say, or you'll lose everything." His brow furrowed. "You're asking me to surrender my company." "No," I said, leaning forward. "I'm asking you to let me save it. There's a difference." By noon, the meeting room was full. The air buzzed with tension, a mix of skepticism and fear. A young executive whispered to another, "That's the ex-advisor who got blacklisted years ago." I heard it. I let it hang. Sometimes, letting people underestimate you is the best way to control them. I stood, clicked the projector, and began dissecting their downfall line by line. "You've been paying for fake stability," I said, pacing slowly. "Diversification is a joke. Your liquidity buffer is 2 weeks deep. And your risk exposure?" I looked directly at Gregory. "You're leveraged on wishful thinking." They shifted uncomfortably. One man scoffed. "Who even are you?" Gregory's voice cut through the room like a blade. "The person who just saved your job. Sit down." And for the first time in years, I saw it, humility on his face. Hours passed. I worked through every spreadsheet, every unpaid invoice, every toxic loan. My mind was on fire, sharp, alive, free. It was as if the ashes of my old life had turned into armor. At one point, Gregory leaned close and whispered. I forgot how terrifying competence looks up close. "Don't flatter me," I replied. "Just listen." We mapped out a 3-stage recovery. 1. Freeze discretionary spending. 2. Negotiate emergency credit extensions. 3. Cut 2 subsidiaries to save the core. Painful, brutal, but it would work. When we finished, he just sat there, staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not," I said. "You just never had to bleed for it." That night, I stayed in the office long after everyone left. The city lights shimmered against the windows, hundreds of lives moving, unaware of the quiet resurrection happening on the 34th floor. I thought of Darren, of how he'd used my name to destroy what I'd built, and how, by saving Gregory's empire, I might finally earn my way back to myself. I pulled out my phone and opened an old message. "Mom, please don't hate me, Sia." I didn't delete it this time. I just whispered, "I don't. But you broke something that took me decades to build." At 2 a.m., Gregory returned with 2 cups of black coffee. "You're still here?" I nodded. "Crisis doesn't clock out at 5. He sat beside me, quiet for a moment. "You could have turned me away, after what I said at the diner." "I could have," I said, "but then I'd be wasting the lesson you just paid to teach me." He frowned. "Which is?" "That power doesn't vanish when people stop believing in you. It just hides until you remember who you are." He stared at me for a long moment, then said softly, "Susan, I think you just saved my life." I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't see a rival or a rich man trying to control the world. I saw a mirror, a warning of what happens when pride devours wisdom. "Go home, Gregory," I said gently. "Tomorrow we rebuild." He nodded. "Whatever you say." As the elevator doors closed behind him, I leaned back in the chair, exhaustion sinking into my bones. For years, people had taken things from me, my name, my title, my peace. But tonight, in this quiet office above a city that once spit me out, I'd taken something back. Not revenge. Not power. But proof that I was never finished. The next morning, the office buzzed with the kind of nervous energy that fills a room when people realize someone else is now holding the reins. That someone was me. Gregory showed up looking different, not in clothes, but in posture. He no longer strutted. He followed. Behind him trailed his CFO, legal counsel, and a few executives who'd clearly Googled me overnight. Their faces carried equal parts suspicion and awe. "Good morning," I said, standing by the whiteboard already filled with notes and timelines. "We don't have time for egos today. We're not saving your comfort zones. We're saving your company." No one argued. The first week was chaos. I barely slept. Days blurred into nights, coffee into adrenaline. I tore through their financial labyrinth, one misleading report after another, until I found what I was looking for, the real reason the company was dying. Gregory hadn't just made risky investments. He'd trusted the wrong people. A partner named Ellison who'd been quietly siphoning funds for 2 years. When I laid out the evidence in the conference room, the silence was heavy enough to choke on. Gregory looked like someone had punched the air out of his chest. "You're sure?" I turned the screen toward him. "Every transfer, every falsified invoice. He's been bleeding you dry while telling you it's growth." He sat back slowly, face pale. "My God." I crossed my arms. "Your God had nothing to do with it. This was pride. You built a kingdom on trust and never checked the locks." For once, he didn't argue. He just nodded, eyes hard. "Then we lock him out today." By the end of that week, Ellison was gone, escorted out by security while the staff whispered behind glass doors. Gregory signed a stack of documents that put me in temporary control of all restructuring operations. "Temporary," he said, hesitating with the pen in his hand. I met his gaze. Of course. But we both knew better. The next phase was brutal. We closed 2 divisions, liquidated 1, and froze all executive bonuses. The backlash was immediate angry emails, threats of resignation, boardroom whispers that I was overstepping. I'd heard it all before, from men who mistook control for competence. But when the first quarterly report came back, profits stabilizing for the first time in 18 months, the whispers died. Gregory came to my office one evening, holding the report like it was something sacred. "You did it," he said quietly. "We're not just surviving, we're solvent." I looked up from my notes. "You sound surprised." "I shouldn't be," he admitted, "but I am." He sat across from me, watching me in that curious, almost reverent way. "You know," he said, "when I saw you at that diner, I thought you were broken." I smiled faintly. Maybe I was, but sometimes the only way to rebuild is to be unrecognizable. Later that week, we met with the board. Gregory introduced me as the consultant who saved this company, but before he could continue, I interrupted. "Let's be clear," I said, standing. "I didn't save your company. I forced it to face itself, and now you'll do the same." Then I slid a folder across the table, my conditions. 1. A full notarized letter to the Financial Licensing Board, publicly clearing my name. 2. Reinstatement of my professional credentials. 3. A press statement crediting me for leading the company's recovery plan. The room went silent. One board member, a smug man in a navy suit, said, "That's excessive." I leaned forward. "So is losing everything because of someone else's lies." Gregory didn't even blink. He picked up the folder, flipped to the signature page, and signed. "There," he said, "done." That night, after everyone left, I stood by the window overlooking the city. Neon lights shimmered on glass towers, each one a monument to ambition and delusion. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small beneath them. Gregory joined me quietly. "You're free now," he said. "Freedom's not the goal," I replied. "Clarity is." He nodded slowly. "So what will you do now? Go back to the world that turned on you?" I looked at my reflection in the glass, the faint streaks of gray in my hair, the steady calm in my eyes. "No," I said, "I'm not going back. I'm going forward, just not where people expect." Before leaving that night, I placed a single envelope on Gregory's desk. Inside was a simple note. "You were never my enemy, just my reminder of what happens when arrogance outruns wisdom." And beneath it, my final invoice. Not for money, but for gratitude. He found it the next morning, and for once, he didn't call. He understood. Driving home, I thought about Darren again, about the wreckage his choices had left in my life, and for the first time, I didn't feel hatred. I felt distance, the kind that comes when pain stops defining you. He'd made me lose everything, but that loss had carved out space for this version of me, one that didn't need anyone's permission to stand tall. As I pulled into my driveway, the radio played faintly, a song I used to hum when I worked late at the office years ago. It didn't make me sad anymore. It made me grateful. Because somehow, through all the noise, I'd found my own quiet rhythm again. The letter arrived 3 weeks later. Why? Plain white envelope, no return address. But the handwriting, I'd know it anywhere. Darren. For a moment, I just stood in my kitchen, the envelope trembling in my hand like it was made of glass. I wasn't sure if I was ready to open it. There are wounds you learn to live around, not through. When I finally tore it open, a folded page slid out. His words were uneven, smudged, like they'd been written through tears. "Mom, I know you don't owe me a single second of your forgiveness, but I'm asking for one. Just 1 second to say I'm sorry. I ruined everything you built, and I ruined the one thing I can never rebuild. Your trust. I don't expect you to visit, but I want you to know I've changed. I'm working at a halfway home now, teaching finance basics to people like me, people who thought shortcuts were strength. You were right all along. Real wealth is what you keep when everything else is gone." Darren. I sat down. I didn't cry. I just breathed. Because for the first time in years, my son's words didn't sound like excuses. They sounded like truth. The next morning, I drove to the address printed at the bottom of the page. It was a small community center on the edge of town. Peeling paint, worn benches, a hand-painted sign that read, "Second Chances Matter." Inside, a group of men and women sat in a circle, notebooks open. And there he was, my son. His hair was shorter now, streaked with worry and regret. When he saw me in the doorway, his pen froze mid-sentence. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then he whispered, "Mom." I nodded. "Finish your lesson." He smiled faintly, timid, disbelieving, and turned back to his group. I listened quietly as he explained how debt traps work, how easy it is to lose everything when greed disguises itself as ambition. His voice shook, but his words carried weight. Real weight. When the class ended, he walked toward me slowly, like someone approaching a ghost. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I didn't either," I admitted. "But sometimes the story deserves an ending." He looked down. "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "No, I hated what you did. That's different." Tears filled his eyes. "I thought I was helping you. I wanted to prove I could make money faster. You spent your life saving other people's futures. I wanted to show you I could save ours." I exhaled softly. "And instead, you burned it down." He nodded. "I know." There was a long pause, the kind that stretches time thin enough to see through it. Finally, I reached out, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You're fixing other people's mistakes now. Maybe that's how you start fixing your own." He covered my hand with his, trembling. "Does this mean we're okay?" I smiled. "No, but it means we could be." That night, I went home lighter. The apartment felt different, not bigger, just enough. I poured myself tea and opened my laptop. My inbox was full of messages, articles, invitations. Gregory had kept his word. A public statement now lived online. Former advisor Susan Hayes has been reinstated and recognized for her leadership in restoring Shaw Financial's integrity. Her expertise saved not just a company, but its conscience. It wasn't redemption I wanted, it was acknowledgement. And seeing it in print felt like standing in sunlight after years of fog. Over the next few weeks, calls started coming in. Old colleagues, former clients. "Susan, we heard. Come back. We'd love to have you. We always knew you weren't guilty." I listened politely, smiled where appropriate, and declined every offer. Because I realized something sitting behind that diner counter every night. I didn't miss the money. I missed meaning. A month later, I stopped by the Maple Diner again. Paul looked up from the register, eyes wide. "Susan, you're alive." "Barely," I laughed. He handed me a coffee and said, "Word is you saved a company worth millions." "Just cleaned up a mess," I replied. He nodded. "You always did that better than most." I slipped my apron back on, not as an employee this time, but as a guest helping during a rush hour. The smell of coffee, the clatter of cups, the soft hum of human life in motion. This was the sound of peace. When I left, Jenna hugged me tight. "You could be out there consulting, living fancy again." I smiled. "Maybe, but I like knowing I can afford peace now, and I don't mean with money." Outside, the wind was cool and steady. I looked up at the city skyline and thought about all the versions of myself I'd buried. The advisor, the mother, the woman who lost everything. They'd all survived to build this one, calm, grounded, free. Later that night, I wrote Darren back. "You asked if we're okay. We're getting there. Keep teaching, keep choosing the slow, honest path. And if you ever doubt yourself, remember I fell too, but I stood up again. You can too. Love, Mom." Some mornings still start before the sun. I wake to the smell of coffee, the sound of the city breathing through thin curtains, and the quiet hum of a life rebuilt from ashes. There's no rush now, no headlines to chase, no board meetings to impress. Just peace. Hard-earned, steady, and mine. I still work at the diner sometimes, not because I have to, but because I want to. It grounds me, the rhythm, the small talk, the smiles from strangers who'll never know my past. It reminds me that value isn't measured in zeros. It's measured in presence. One morning, a new waitress, barely 20, nervous and shaky, dropped a tray of dishes. They shattered across the floor. Everyone turned to stare. Her face went pale, her eyes wet. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I knelt down beside her, helping gather the pieces. "It's just glass," I said softly. "Not your worth." She looked at me like no one had ever said that to her before. As we cleaned up, I caught my reflection in the chrome counter, older, yes, but calmer, softer. There was strength in that softness. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything anymore. After my shift, I took a walk by the harbor, the same place I used to sit during the worst nights of my downfall. Back then, I'd stare at the water and wonder how everything could change so fast, how a name that once opened doors could suddenly lock them. Now, I looked out at that same horizon and smiled. Because the truth was, I didn't lose myself back then. I just got stripped down to what mattered. The world took my reputation. It took my career. It even tried to take my dignity, but it never took my mind. And that mind, patient, precise, relentless, was what rebuilt me. A few months later, I got a letter from Gregory Shaw. Short, handwritten, almost humble. "Susan, the company is thriving. Investors trust us again. The board still talks about you like a myth. I wanted you to know your methods changed more than our numbers. They changed me. If you ever want your old seat back, it's yours. Gregory." I folded the letter, smiled, and slid it into a drawer. Some doors are better left closed, not out of bitterness, but completion. On Sundays, Darren visits sometimes. We don't talk much about the past. We sit on my porch with 2 mugs of tea and watch the sun dip behind the rooftops. The The silence isn't awkward anymore. It's healing. Last week, he told me he's saving to start a small financial literacy program for at-risk youth. He grinned and said, "Guess it runs in the family." I laughed, not the bitter kind, but the kind that releases years of weight. "Just promise me," I said, "you'll never build anything faster than you can carry it." He nodded, eyes soft. I learned from the best. Sometimes, I still get recognized rarely, but it happens. A former client will stop me mid-order, eyes wide. "Susan Hayes, it is you!" They expect embarrassment, but I just smile. "Yes, can I get you a refill?" They never quite know how to respond, and that's okay, because I do. I'm not ashamed of the journey anymore. The shame belonged to the lie, not the survival. On quiet nights, I light a single candle and write in a small leather notebook, lessons I wish I'd known sooner. Pride can disguise it itself as love. Success without peace is just noise. And forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it means freeing your hands to build something new. A few days ago, a man at table 7, a kind-faced stranger in his 60s, looked up as I set his coffee down and said, "You have such calm about you. You must have lived a good life." I smiled. "I've lived a real one." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's rarer." As I walked away, I thought about how far I'd come from scandal to silence, from ruin to resolve. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need redemption anymore, because peace was the redemption. The night ends, the lights dim, and the diner quiets to a hum. Outside, the city glows steady, alive. I hang up my apron, look out the window, and whisper to myself, "They took my name, my pride, my past, but not my mind." And that was all I ever needed to rebuild.